Deader Elara Quinn sat hunched over the glowing console, her fingers flying over the keys as data from the ancient ruins scrolled past her eyes with rapid intensity. The signal had been discovered by accident, buried deep in the archives of the old lunar observatory. When they first found it, no one believed it was anything important, a mere glitch from a forgotten probe. But Elara had a gut feeling. It was more than that. The strange signal repeated itself every few seconds, its pattern too perfect to be random. There was something hidden within it, a message buried in a sea of static and noise. She had to know what it was. The research facility was quiet except for the hum of the servers and the faint tapping of Ilara's fingers. She had become obsessed with the code. The others had long since given up, but she refused to stop, convinced there was a clue hidden within it, a secret that could change everything. The signal was unlike anything they had encountered before. It wasn't just data, it was structured in a way that suggested intelligence behind it. As Elara worked late into the night, deciphering the signal, she stumbled upon a breakthrough, a series of mathematical equations hidden in the pattern like a key that unlocked the message. Her heart raced as she realized what she had found: a set of coordinates and a string of complex equations that hinted at faster-than-light travel, a theory that had eluded humanity for centuries. Ilara's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just some ancient transmission. It was a message from an advanced civilization. It was the key to the warp drive, something that could propel humanity across the stars and beyond. For the first time in history, the possibility of faster-than-light travel seemed real. Her mind raced as she ran through the implications of the discovery. Humanity's future had just been rewritten. She rushed to contact her team, a small group of physicists, engineers, and mathematicians who had been working on theories of warp travel for years. They had been struggling to find a breakthrough without success. But now Elara had found the first real clue. She could feel the excitement building as she sent the encrypted message to her colleague, Dr. Julian Harris, a theoretical physicist who had been her mentor and friend for years. Julian was skeptical at first, but when he saw the data, his skepticism melted away. They knew they were standing on the edge of something monumental. As they gathered in the conference room with the team, Elara explained her findings, her voice steady yet filled with excitement. The others listened intently as she outlined the coordinates and the equations. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. Julian's voice cracked with disbelief as he asked if it was possible. Elara nodded slowly. They had always believed that warp travel was a theory, a dream that could never be realized. But now they had proof. It wasn't just a dream, it was a blueprint for the future. The room fell silent as the weight of the discovery settled in. This was bigger than anything they had ever imagined. It wasn't just about exploring distant star systems. It was about rewriting the very fabric of space itself. The chance to break free of the constraints of light speed, to reach the stars and beyond. Elara knew that the world would soon know what they had found, and she knew that the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges. But she also knew that humanity had just taken its first step into a new age of exploration and possibility. The following weeks passed in a blur. Elara barely slept or ate as she and her team pored over the data in frantic pursuit of the breakthrough. They had discovered the equations were more complicated than they had anticipated, yet each new step forward felt like an accomplishment. They were closing in on something vast and untold. The more they worked, the more Elara realized that this was no mere accident. The design of the equations felt intentional. They weren't just formulas. They were a map, a blueprint for understanding the very fabric of the universe. The world was beginning to take notice. The encrypted transmission that Elara had deciphered had been sent to the top scientific and governmental authorities across the globe, and within days an international task force had been assembled. The public announcement of the discovery caused waves in the scientific community. Governments scrambled to claim ownership and control over the technology. The media buzzed with speculation on what humanity might soon achieve. But Elara's team remained focused on the task at hand. They could not afford distractions, not yet, not until they knew how to make the warp drive work. Tension quickly mounted as other nations and private corporations expressed their interests in the discovery. They demanded access to the research and offered huge sums of money and resources in exchange for cooperation, while some of Ilara's colleagues saw this as an opportunity to secure funding and support. Ilara remained wary. She knew that such power could be easily exploited, and she wasn't ready to hand over the keys to the kingdom to those who might misuse them. In secret, the team continued their work using a secure private lab hidden deep beneath the surface of the Arctic, where no one could eavesdrop on their progress. It was a risky decision, but they knew they had no choice. If humanity was going to break free from the chains of light speed, they needed to stay ahead of the competition. The lab became a sanctuary for the team, isolated and remote, yet it offered them the freedom to think and work without interference. Days turned into weeks as they ran simulations and performed calculations, trying to apply the equations to real-world applications. Every test led to new challenges. The equations worked in theory, but when they tried to build a practical model, the results were less than perfect. Their first attempt to create a warp engine was a failure. The device didn't generate enough energy to even begin bending space-time, much less propel a ship faster than light. Frustration and doubt began to creep into their ranks. But Ilara refused to give up. The dream of interstellar travel was too close, too tangible to let slip away. Then one evening, a breakthrough came when Julian Harris, her trusted mentor, discovered an anomaly within the equations that hadn't been considered before. It was a subtle discrepancy, something so small that most would have missed it, but it was the key to unlocking the warp drive's power. The problem was not in the equation itself, but in how the energy was being distributed across the system. By adjusting the way energy interacted with the space-time fabric, they could generate enough of a warp bubble to allow for faster-than-light travel. Ilara's heart pounded as she saw the potential in Julian's work. It was the missing piece of the puzzle, the shift that would make warp travel possible. The team worked tirelessly around the clock building the new prototype. This one would work. They knew it now. The energy core was stronger, the space-time bubble more stable. They weren't just close to their goal, they had reached it. The moment of truth arrived when the first functional prototype of the warp drive was ready for testing. The world waited anxiously. As the countdown began, Ilara stood at the control station, her breath shallow as she stared at the ship positioned on a launch pad outside the testing chamber. The whole world was watching, and in that moment she realized just how high the stakes had become. This was humanity's first step into the unknown. The future was within their grasp, and the only thing left to do was see if it would hold. The moment the countdown reached 0, the ground trembled as the warp engine powered up. Ilara's heart raced as the hum of energy filled the control room. She exchanged a tense glance with Julian, who stood beside her, his face grim but determined. Outside, the sleek ship, now equipped with the prototype warp drive, stood motionless, its hull gleaming under the harsh lights of the testing facility. Everything they had worked for came down to this single moment. As the energy levels climbed, the ship's engines glowed a vibrant blue, and a ripple seemed to vibrate the air around it. Ilara could feel the air growing heavy, charged with the raw power surging from the ship's core. She adjusted the settings, fine-tuning the controls, her fingers flying across the console, checking and rechecking the readings. Each number, each measurement had to be perfect. This was no longer just a test. This was history in the making. The ship's systems responded as they had been designed, but something felt off. The warp bubble began to form around the ship, shimmering and twisting in the air like a mirage. But it was unstable. The readings fluctuated, and the energy flow seemed to pulse erratically. Ilara's fingers hovered above the emergency shutdown button. They had designed this system with safety in mind, but the possibility of failure loomed. "Steady," Julian muttered, his voice low and strained, as the ship shook ever so slightly. "We've come too far for this to fail now." Suddenly, with a jolt that sent vibrations through the facility, the warp bubble stabilized for just a second, a brief golden instant. And then the ship vanished. Ilara gasped, her eyes wide as the screen in front of her went blank, showing nothing but static. The room fell into stunned silence. She looked over to Julian, who was just as speechless. The room was filled with an overwhelming sense of disbelief. Had they done it? Was it really possible? No one had expected the test to be successful on the first try, but it had been. Then, just as suddenly, the ship reappeared on the monitor, but it wasn't in the same place. It had moved. Far moved. The readings showed that it was now over 50 million kilometers away, an unfathomable distance in the blink of an eye. The coordinates lined up perfectly with the distant star system they had targeted for the test. The ship had traveled across space, faster than light, in a fraction of a second. A flood of excitement rushed through the control room, and Ilara could barely contain her exhilaration. They had cracked it. Warp travel was real. Their experiment had worked. She turned to Julian, and he couldn't help but smile, a look of pure pride on his face. But even as the euphoria swept through them, a cold wave of realization followed. Do we know if the crew is okay? Ilara's voice was a whisper. The ship, though unmanned, was designed to simulate the effects of a real flight, but they had no way of knowing how the forces at play would affect anything or anyone that traveled inside the bubble. The energy involved was immense, and though they had accounted for safety, this was all new territory. We need to check, Julian said, already pulling up the diagnostics on his terminal. The ship's sensors were still live, and within moments, they saw the results. The system had been intact. The crew module's structural integrity was unaffected. It was a relief, but one tinged with unease. The first test had succeeded, but they had merely scratched the surface of what they had achieved. Outside, the facility was abuzz with activity. The news had already started to leak, and within hours, the world would know what had happened. Humanity had just taken its first step into a larger universe, but there was still so much left to figure out. Ilara stared at the readings in front of her, a storm of emotions swirling in her mind. The implications of this success were far greater than anything she had ever imagined. The warp drive worked, but what came next? How would the world react? Would they be ready for what lay ahead, or had they unleashed something they couldn't control? We've done it, she whispered to herself, though the words felt almost hollow. They had cracked the code, but the journey had only just begun. As the days passed after the successful test, the world exploded with excitement and fear. News outlets bombarded the public with headlines proclaiming the dawn of a new age. But with every new article came a new set of questions. Could humanity truly handle such power? Would they be ready for the responsibility that came with it? Ilara couldn't escape the whirlwind of media attention, nor could she ignore the growing pressure from governments and corporations eager to seize control of the technology. Inside the Arctic lab, Ilara and her team worked tirelessly, trying to perfect the warp drive and ensure that their initial success wasn't just a fluke. The strain of the previous weeks had left them all exhausted, but the promise of a future that no one had ever imagined kept them going. They adjusted the calculations, tested new components, and fine-tuned the warp bubble generators. Each step forward felt like a victory, but the pressure to make their next test perfect loomed over them. They couldn't afford another failure. It was during one of these long nights that they discovered something new, something unexpected. The energy readings, which had been stable during the previous test, now displayed strange fluctuations. For a split second, Ilara thought it might be a technical glitch, but the longer they studied the data, the more they realized it wasn't a malfunction. The warp bubble, it seemed, was interacting with space-time in ways they hadn't anticipated. There was a pattern in the fluctuations, something beyond just energy instability. "Look at this," Ilara said, pointing to the screen. "This isn't just a random fluctuation. This looks like communication." Julian leaned over her shoulder, his brow furrowed as he scanned the data. "What do you mean? Communication from where?" "Not from a person, not directly," she replied, her voice filled with disbelief. "But I think the warp drive might be reacting to something in the fabric of space itself. It's as if we're tapping into a network of signals buried deep in the cosmos, almost like the warp field is picking up some kind of message. Her team gathered around the console, eyes wide. If Ilara was right, this could change everything. The warp drive wasn't just opening a door to faster-than-light travel. It was opening a window to something else, something they had never even dreamed of. The idea that there might be a cosmic network, an ancient intelligence or unknown presence scattered across the galaxy, was both thrilling and terrifying. Could it be that other civilizations had already discovered this? Were they still out there, waiting to make contact? The thought that they might be on the brink of discovering a galactic web of intelligence sent shivers down her spine. Humanity had cracked the code to warp travel, but what if they were not the only ones who had done so? What if others had been watching? "We need to investigate this," Julian said, his voice serious now. "If there's even a chance that we're not alone, we need to know. We need to figure out how to communicate, how to interpret these signals." Ilara nodded, but unease crept in. If they were indeed picking up something, or someone out there, the implications were far-reaching. Were these other civilizations still alive, still out there, waiting for humanity to join them in the stars? Or had they all fallen silent, lost to time and forgotten by the universe? The following days were spent diving deeper into the strange signal patterns they had discovered. The team worked around the clock, decoding fragments of data from the warp drive's interface, hoping to find more clues about the mysterious signal. As they worked, Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that someone, or something, was already aware of humanity's leap into this new frontier. And then the breakthrough came. One evening, after a particularly grueling round of tests, Ilara saw something on the display that made her freeze. It wasn't just another anomaly in the readings. This time, the signal wasn't a random burst of data. It was a message, a sequence of numbers and symbols that, though unfamiliar, seemed strangely purposeful. Her fingers trembled as she traced the code, piecing it together. It was a message that was clearly meant for them. "Julian," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I think they're reaching out to us." The room fell silent. The discovery was beyond anything they had ever imagined. The warp drive had not only made interstellar travel possible, but it had also connected them to something much larger. A vast, unseen network that spanned the cosmos, waiting to reveal itself to those who were ready. Ilara's heart raced. They had just uncovered the first sign that humanity wasn't alone in the universe, and now they had to decide what to do with the knowledge. The risks of making this discovery public were immense. Who could be trusted with such power? Could humanity handle the responsibility of interacting with forces far beyond their understanding? The answers were just beginning to unfold, and Ilara knew that the journey ahead would be anything but simple. The discovery sent shockwaves through Ilara's team and beyond. The message was clear. There were others out there, and they were aware of humanity's advancements. The signals were not just random patterns, but an invitation, or perhaps a warning. The cryptic symbols seemed to contain deeper meanings, things they couldn't fully comprehend yet. Ilara's hands shook as she stared at the last fragment they had decrypted. The message wasn't just alien. It was ancient, predating humanity's rise to space travel. As Ilara's team gathered around the console, trying to make sense of what they had uncovered, the outside world began to take notice in ways that would change everything. Governments, especially those with militaristic ambitions, began to demand access to their research. A world that had been unified by the promise of warp travel was now divided by the desire to control it. Within hours, a coalition of powerful nations came forward, claiming they had the right to control any technology that could alter the balance of power. The race to harness the warp drive was no longer a scientific endeavor. It had turned into a geopolitical struggle. Ilara tried to remain focused, her mind constantly torn between the potential benefits of the technology and the very real dangers of its misuse. The encrypted message, the one that spoke of cosmic intelligence and unknown forces, was becoming more urgent with every passing day. The signals were coming faster now, almost as if someone, or something, was waiting for a response. It wasn't long before the calls started arriving. Private messages from the highest echelons of power, offering staggering amounts of money, resources, and political influence in exchange for access to their research. "I don't trust them, Ilara," Julian said one evening, his voice heavy with concern. "We're sitting on a powder keg. If we give in to them, if we allow this to be weaponized, we could be signing humanity's death sentence." Ilara sat in silence, the weight of his words sinking in. She had known the risks, of course, but now the reality of it felt more pressing than ever. The very technology they had hoped would unite humanity was now the thing that could tear it apart. The potential for peace and exploration was there, but so was the potential for destruction. In the dead of night, Ilara received a message that sent a chill down her spine. It wasn't from any government or corporation. It came from an unknown source, an encrypted transmission bearing the same cryptic symbols they had uncovered earlier. The message was simple, but it carried an unmistakable urgency. "Do not trust the others. They are already coming." A cold shiver ran through her. Who was sending this? And what did it mean? The team worked frantically, decrypting the message with a renewed sense of fear and resolve. The more they decoded, the clearer it became. Someone, or something, knew exactly what humanity had discovered, and they didn't want the world to have it. The signals from deep space had intensified, almost as if they were coming from a central source. The team realized that the messages were not just warnings. They were instructions, guiding them through a maze of cosmic knowledge, telling them how to unlock more of the warp technology's true potential. But there was something else, something darker buried in the data. A warning about a race far older than humanity, one that had watched and waited for millennia, for civilizations capable of mastering warp travel. The message spoke of the Voral, an ancient, all-powerful race that had seeded the galaxy with the knowledge of faster-than-light travel long before humanity ever dreamed of it. "They know we're ready," Julian said, his voice tight with fear. "And they won't let us get away with it. We've opened a door that shouldn't have been opened." The realization hit Ilara like a punch to the gut. If the Voral were real, if they had been watching humanity all this time, then what would happen when they made contact? The world wasn't ready for this kind of revelation, not even close. She could already see the growing divisions within her team, the whispers of mistrust, and the looming shadow of political forces tightening their grip. "We need to prepare," Ilara said, her voice low but firm. "We need to make sure the technology stays with those who will use it responsibly, and we need to be ready for whatever comes next." The warp drive had opened a door to the stars, but it had also opened a door to something much bigger, something that could change the fate of humanity forever. And with every step forward, Ilara could feel the weight of that responsibility bearing down on her. As the tension continued to grow, Ilara knew one thing for certain. Humanity was about to be tested in ways it could never have imagined. The world wasn't ready for what was coming. But soon, they would have no choice but to face it head-on. The days that followed were a blur of intense work, constant alerts, and mounting anxiety. Ilara had never imagined that uncovering the secrets of faster-than-light travel would bring humanity to the brink of chaos. The decoded messages kept coming, and with each new transmission, it became clearer that the Voral were not a mere myth. They were real, and they were watching. In the secluded Arctic lab, the team continued their research in near isolation, but the world outside was descending into political turmoil. Various factions had begun jockeying for control of the warp technology, with alliances shifting and breaking at an alarming rate. Some wanted to use it for peaceful exploration, others for military dominance. In every corner of the globe, governments were scrambling to be the first to unlock the full potential of the technology, and the result was a fragile tension that threatened to tear apart any hope for a unified future. Despite the growing external pressures, Ilara's focus remained on the signals. She was determined to understand them, to decipher every hidden meaning and warning buried within. The messages had started to become less cryptic, Where once there had been strange patterns, now there were direct instructions, coordinates, systems, even detailed equations that suggested the next step in their journey. Julian had become more withdrawn, obsessively running calculations and simulations. There was something about the Vorl that deeply unsettled him. He spent sleepless nights mulling over the encrypted transmissions, his mind racing to understand the deeper implications of what they were about to uncover. The warnings were becoming impossible to ignore. "We're playing with fire, Ilara," Julian said one night as they stood in the observation room, staring at the stars through the reinforced glass. If the Vorl wanted to stop us, they could have done so already. The fact that they haven't, well, that doesn't sit right with me. What if this isn't just a warning? What if we're part of something much bigger, something beyond our control? Ilara watched the stars shimmer in the distance, her mind swirling with the same thoughts. The Vorl were ancient, perhaps older than any known civilization. Their message had been clear: do not trust the others. They are already coming. Who were they warning them about? And why hadn't the Vorl intervened sooner? She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being guided, manipulated even. But by whom? And for what purpose? The next morning, the answer began to present itself. A new transmission appeared, this time without warning. The message was different. It was far more complex than any they had received before, a jumble of cryptic symbols, geometric patterns, and strange mathematical sequences. Yet, amidst the chaos, one pattern stood out: coordinates that led directly to an uncharted star system on the far edge of the galaxy. A system that, according to the data they had, was not known to humanity. This was no coincidence. Ilara stood frozen as the full weight of the revelation hit her. The Vorl weren't just watching. They were leading them somewhere. To something. But what? The possibility of discovering the source of the Vorl's ancient knowledge, or perhaps their origin, was tantalizing. Yet, a deep sense of dread gripped her heart. Were they being guided to their doom? "Julian, look at this," Ilara whispered, her voice shaking. "These coordinates, they're telling us to go to a place we've never been. But why now?" He studied the screen, his expression growing darker. "Maybe the Vorl have been waiting for us to be ready. Maybe we've passed some threshold, something that's been set in motion long before we even understood what we were doing." Ilara's mind raced. Could they truly trust these messages? Were they leading humanity into a trap, or was this their chance to prove that they had the strength and wisdom to face the unknown? "We have to go," Ilara said, her voice firm with determination. "The answers are out there. The Vorl are giving us a chance. Whether it's a test or an invitation, we can't ignore it." The decision was made. They would go to the coordinates, to the star system that lay beyond the reaches of their current knowledge. The technology was ready. The ship was prepared. But the true question loomed large. Could humanity handle the consequences of what they were about to discover? The world would soon be watching, and Ilara knew that no matter what happened, the path they had set in motion was irreversible. The stars were calling, and humanity was poised to answer. But as Ilara stood on the precipice of this new chapter, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were no longer the ones in control. The Vorl had been waiting for this moment, and now they had to find out if humanity was ready for the truth, whatever it might be. The journey to the uncharted star system was unlike anything Ilara had ever experienced. The warp drive, now fine-tuned and fully operational, pushed the ship through the vast expanse of space, the stars blurring into streaks of light as they crossed vast distances in the blink of an eye. The team sat in tense silence as the ship moved toward the coordinates provided by the Vorl. The air was thick with anticipation, and every beep and hum from the ship's systems only added to the growing unease. Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every moment felt like a step deeper into the unknown, a journey that humanity had never been prepared for. The message from the Vorl was still fresh in her mind. Do not trust the others. They are already coming. The implication was clear. There was something or someone else in the galaxy that had its eyes on them. Were the Vorl warning them about another race, Or were they warning them about themselves? Julian, who had been quiet for most of the trip, finally spoke up. "We're close," he said, his voice tinged with both excitement and apprehension. "I can feel it in the data. The readings are consistent with the coordinates. But there's something odd. Something unnatural." Ilara's eyes narrowed as she scanned the displays. The system they were approaching was devoid of any stars. It was almost as if the space around it had been intentionally cleared. There was a black hole at its center, but it was different from any black hole they had encountered before. Its gravitational field was strangely stable, as if it had been artificially constructed or manipulated. The deeper they got, the more Ilara could sense a presence, an almost imperceptible hum in the fabric of space itself. "What is that?" Ilara murmured, pointing to a cluster of energy readings on the edge of the black hole's event horizon. The energy seemed to pulse rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. It was faint but unmistakable. Julian's face turned pale. "We're not alone. Whatever's out there, it's aware of us." The ship's sensors began to flicker, and the atmosphere in the control room grew thick with tension. Outside the viewport, the black hole loomed closer, its immense pull warping the very light around it. It was an unnatural phenomenon, and Ilara had no doubt that the Voral had been guiding them here for a reason. But what was the purpose of this place? Why had they brought them to the edge of the galaxy, to a starless void surrounded by nothing but darkness? Suddenly, a deep, low hum resonated through the ship. It wasn't coming from the warp engines. It wasn't coming from any of their systems. It was coming from space itself. The sound seemed to vibrate in the bones of everyone on board, and the ship's metal hull trembled under the pressure. The lights inside flickered, casting long shadows across the room. Then it happened. A ripple in space, like a sudden wave across a calm ocean. The ship lurched violently as the space around them seemed to bend and twist. Ilara grabbed onto the nearest console to steady herself, her heart pounding in her chest. "Hold on," Julian shouted, as alarms blared, warning them of a gravitational anomaly. The ship began to spin uncontrollably, the systems failing one by one as they approached the heart of the disturbance. Ilara's mind raced. The black hole was pulling them in, but not just physically. It was pulling them into something deeper, into the unknown, something beyond the confines of space as they knew it. She tried to override the controls, but nothing worked. They were helpless as the ship continued its violent descent toward the event horizon. "We need to pull out of here," Ilara yelled, panic rising in her chest. "We can't go any further. We'll be torn apart." But the ship wouldn't respond. The warp drive had become unresponsive, the energy readings fluctuating wildly. The presence they had felt before was now overwhelming. The vibration was no longer just an unsettling hum. It was a force, an ancient power that gripped the very fabric of space around them. The stars outside the viewport twisted into chaotic patterns, and time seemed to lose meaning. As the ship continued its descent toward the black hole's event horizon, Ilara's mind raced with possibilities. What was at the center of this void? Had they been led here by the Voral to face something, or someone, unknown? And was this the moment humanity was truly being tested? But just as the ship seemed to reach the edge of destruction, something shifted. A brilliant flash of light enveloped the craft, and the violent pull of the black hole suddenly ceased. The tremors stopped. The hum faded. Ilara blinked, disoriented, and slowly turned toward the console. The ship was no longer falling toward the black hole. It had stopped, suspended in space, at the center of a vast and empty expanse. There was no sound, no light, just silence. And then, a voice echoed through the ship, a deep, resonating presence that seemed to come from the very heart of the universe itself. "Welcome, travelers. You have come far, but your journey is only just beginning." Ilara froze, her breath caught in her throat as the voice reverberated through the ship. It wasn't coming from the communication system. It wasn't coming from anywhere physical. It was all around them, a presence that seemed to emanate from the very fabric of space itself, as if the universe itself was speaking. The team exchanged uncertain glances, too stunned to speak, their minds reeling. "Welcome, travelers. You have come far, but your journey is only just beginning." The words hung in the air, laden with power. It wasn't just a greeting. It felt like a judgment. The voice was neither hostile nor benevolent, but it carried an undeniable weight. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the hum of the ship's remaining functional systems. Ilara swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. Who are you?" The response was immediate, though the voice seemed to fade and reappear in waves, as if stretching across time and space. "I am not of your time, nor of your kind, but I have watched your rise from the dust of your world. You seek answers. But know this, what you seek will change you, for it is not just knowledge, but power. The power to shape the future of the stars themselves." The weight of the words sank in. Ilara felt a strange pull, as if the voice were somehow inside her, probing the deepest corners of her mind. The team was still, silent, all of them sensing the enormity of what was unfolding. This was not some unknown alien. It was something far older, something beyond comprehension. "Why us?" Julian finally spoke, his voice edged with disbelief. "Why did you bring us here? What do you want from us?" There was a pause before the voice responded. "You are not the first to come. Many before you have sought the same answers, but only a few have come close to finding them. Your species is different, though. You possess the will to move beyond your limitations, to reach for the stars without fear. But be warned, what you now face is not a gift, but a challenge. The knowledge you seek will not be handed to you. You must prove yourselves worthy." Ilara's heart pounded. "Prove ourselves? What do you mean?" "You have unlocked the secrets of warp travel. You have traversed the void, broken through the barriers of time and space. But that power is dangerous. The universe is not a passive observer, and it does not welcome intruders lightly. Others, like you, have tried to manipulate the forces of the cosmos. Some have succeeded. Others have failed. Their failures were catastrophic." The voice seemed to linger, as though the weight of ancient memories were pressing down on them. Ilara could feel the gravity of those words. This was no mere warning. It was a test, a trial, perhaps of humanity's readiness to wield the power they had so eagerly unlocked. The voice continued, its tone more solemn. "The Voral are not your allies. They are not even your creators. They are the gatekeepers, the watchers of the knowledge you now possess. They will not allow you to misuse it. You will face them soon, and they will judge you. Your future lies in the choices you make in this moment. Will you seek to conquer, or will you seek to understand?" The ship seemed to tremble, as though it were responding to the voice. Outside, the void remained as still as death, but something about it felt different, charged, alive. The sense of time had warped, and Ilara couldn't tell if they had been in this place for minutes or hours. They were trapped in the grip of something far older than themselves. We just want to learn," Ilara said, her voice shaky but resolute. "We want to understand, to build a future, not to destroy." There was a long pause before the voice responded. "Your intentions matter little. It is your actions that will decide. The path you choose will not be easy, and it will not be without sacrifice. You will either rise or fall, and the galaxy will remember." With that, the presence seemed to recede, the ship's tremors fading, leaving behind an unsettling silence. Ilara's breath steadied, but her mind was still racing. What had just happened? Had they been judged? And what came next? "We need to move," Julian said, his voice suddenly firm. "Whatever this is, we've crossed a threshold. The Voral won't wait forever. We need to be ready." Ilara nodded, taking a deep breath. The weight of the moment was sinking in, but she couldn't afford to dwell on it. The message was clear. Humanity had crossed a line, and now they had to face the consequences. The choices they made in the coming days would shape the future of their species. As the ship's systems slowly began to stabilize, Ilara looked out into the empty expanse of space. The stars, once distant and unreachable, now felt closer than ever. The galaxy stretched out before them, full of untold possibilities, but also dangers beyond their understanding. They had taken the first step into the unknown. But now, Ilara realized the true journey had only just begun.